You know, growing out your hair. It ain't that bad. Ooh, what's up, gamers? It's your boy, JKon. Welcome to another video. So recently I've been playing a variety of games, as you may know if you've checked out my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/JKonXD. I do like to stream Valorant, Counter-Strike, Overwatch, you know, all those fun FPS games, as I've been a pure FPS gamer for majority of my life. But I found a very interesting thing that we can kind of learn from other games that we can take into, I guess, other games. Lessons from various games and how we can implement them as we develop and grow as players. I find it to be very interesting that I think if you have a unique or a variety of background, you actually are, in my opinion, probably a better gamer than someone who is a one-trick. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. Please like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz, as it really does help me out a lot. And, you know, it's been a little while since I posted, so I'm sorry about that. Anyways, without further delay, let's get into it. So this whole idea kind of came up from playing Counter-Strike yesterday with a few of my friends, and I made the comment of how I enjoy Counter-Strike's aspect that you can play almost any role in the game. Now, what do I mean by this? If we compare it to a Valorant sense, Valorant has very distinguished roles with a few agents that cross over between a few of them, like Viper, who is kind of a controller sentinel. But other than that, we have pretty much pure defined roles. We have controllers who obviously create smokes. We have initiators who gather info and flash. We have duelists that are the entry fraggers that can also flash and take first engagements. And we have sentinel players who are usually the lurkers and anchors. Now, the thing with Valorant and with the operator specifically that's kind of been a problem throughout the years is that because there isn't really that many quote-unquote good operator agents, it usually falls onto the jet or chamber player to play the op unless you're PRX something. Anyways, moving on from that point, I enjoy Counter-Strike because it has so much variety in those roles. Because everybody is on a level playing field, everybody can buy the same guns, same utility, and it really depends on your positioning, what side of the map you're on, and like what site you're on. For example, I'll use CT side, where if I want to pick up an op, I can rotate between middle, I can rotate between A, I can hold an angle on B. Your flexibility as an opper gives you a lot of variety. However, that also allows another individual in your team to take over the anchor role. So for example, my role in CT side is I prefer to be a solo anchor, or one of those, like, you know, I hold the line and hold it down. One thing for me as like a fantasy and power fantasy within games is an ability to hold on like against a rush, to be able to outplay them, not only with mechanical skill, but also with like game sense and positioning. And to me, that is one of the most enjoyable aspects about competitive gaming, especially FPS gaming. And being able to do that while not being pinned to that specific role necessarily is really, really nice. If you look at professional Counter-Strike, of course, everybody has a more defined role. You have your CT side anchor, you have your rotators, you have your A side anchor, you have your B side anchor. It really depends, right? But everybody kind of has a set role and position. And one of the downsides to this, in my opinion, is if you don't see that specific player, like the B side anchor, available at the site, you can kind of tell that they're stacking somewhere else, and it becomes a bit of more of a predictable game plan. There was a thread recently that came up in the r/global offensive subreddit talking about KDN's system. And I think Maui Snake brought up a really, really good point about how KDN had a very fluid and gamble heavy system that really worked on team play, coordination, and playing the number odds rather than just having the default like setups that everybody else does. This gave them a very, very high floor because their rules, yes, they did have set defined rules, but because they were flexible, it gave their CT side a more of a T side feeling because they were able to overwhelm and act as a unit comparatively to two separate teams on other sides of the map. Now, how does this relate to Valorant, and what are lessons that we can learn from them? Well, to me, I think one of the biggest pigeonholes that players come across in Valorant is their inability to flex to other roles. And now I'm not just talking about pro play, but I'm also talking about ranked and like the casual experience. I think there is a large lack of understanding between how teams can operate as a unit. One of the things that we talk about all the time is meta. What is a meta composition? And the reason for that is we usually want to fulfill a lot of the quote-unquote holes within a comp to make it as succinct as possible. Let's take the standard default Ascent comp, where you have Jet as the solo entry, you have KO and Sova as the initiators to gather info and get them in there, you have the controller, usually Omen, and you have a Sentinel, a Cypher, or a Killjoy to control the other side of the map. Those are very, very set, defined roles. And as you can see in Valorant, oh, I hear a Killjoy turret set up on B side, so we know that the anchor's on B, so we can rotate. That concept in itself does not necessarily play the same in a quote-unquote role-less game like Counter-Strike, where I can be the solo anchor on a site, but the enemy team doesn't know that I'm solo anchor because I've been able to push out standard utility rather than like a Killjoy turret. So one of the things that I've been a very, very large proponent on in any game is to play other roles and other characters, agents, champions, whatever you want to call them, because they allow you to have a better understanding of what that role is capable of and how it can benefit you in your main role. I think a perfect example of this is that we've seen in pro play would be Edward Gaming in China. EDG for the longest time was built around their superstar player JKon. We feed the beast, we give him an ace, we give him as much utility to set him up as possible, and JKon will carry the way. Obviously, they have Smoggy, who's super clutch, and my boy. You have Chichu, who is one of the best anchors in the world and very, very intelligent. And Haodong is one of the best IGLs in China. So you have a very, very strong team that fell short a lot of the time with international competition. And the main reason for that is because they are a burgeoning region. They don't have the best training. They don't have like the highest talent in the world. But the level is rising very, very quickly in China, and I would not be sleeping on them. I know we kind of been like, oh, they've kind of been disappointing, but like, no cap, FPX was kind of freaking good at Shanghai. Just saying. Anyways, at the beginning of 2024, at kickoff in Masters Madrid, EDG would transition all of their roles and swap it up, taking JKon off of main duelist and putting Smoggy on the role, putting Chichu on controller, putting Haodong on initiator, and just flexing everybody around. And I think this was a good idea because one of the reasons behind it is because they wanted to understand what the other roles are capable of so they can support and play together better as a unit. Now, I think this is so really, really big. And I'm going to take another game that I enjoy playing that can help explain this concept a little bit further. Overwatch. So right now in Overwatch, the transition from Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2, they only have one tank instead of two, and the rest of the roster is spelled out with 2 DPS and 2 healers. A lot of people don't enjoy playing tank because it is a very like thankless role. You kind of just have to be everywhere all at once. You have to protect everybody, but you also have to kill everybody. It's a lot of responsibility and it's a lot of stress. And a lot of people don't enjoy that because not only are tanks the first one to blame, because in my opinion, they are probably the most important player on the field, but it's a thankless role. Now, a tank player who has never played healer may not understand that their positioning is harming their healer's abilities to sustain them. So for example, if I have never played like Anna, for example, the sniper healer where you need to stay in her sight line in order for everything, and I'm like a Winston player and I will just want to play Monkey, or actually I'm a Doomface player, I enjoy playing Doom, so let's use Doom as the example, and I'm like, why is my team not healing me while I'm diving the backline by myself? If I don't have that concept of mind that my team is not able to see me and heal me and understand their limitations, then I think that puts a cap on your own knowledge and capabilities to play as a team. So what I would say and in favor of is trying out those other roles, learning them, understanding them, and getting a sense of what they can and cannot do. So if you do want to go and play a specific role, a specific agent, a specific champ, and have more autonomy on like what you can do, I highly recommend that. one of the biggest things that I think I have beef with across the board, and this really comes from a League of Legends background, and personally a lot of it really comes from my own lack of understanding, and that's the concept of a one trick. I don't get why you would want to be a one trick. For me, only being able to play one to the highest level, know all my matchups, but if I don't get to play that champion, I don't get to play the game. Or if they nerf my champion and now it's like no longer relevant and it makes the game very hard to play, like, I don't want to be pigeonholed into that. Now you can make the argument of the conversation of like the Bruce, or like the, is it Bruce Lee line? It might be a Bruce Lee line, but like, I do not fear the man that has like 1,000 kicks. I fear the man that has who has done one kick 1,000 times or whatever, right? And like, I totally get that. Like, if you have an expertise and put in like all the time and hours into that, by all means, go for it, right? But in situations where things consistently change and update, like metas, items, runes, patches, these live service games that constantly are looking to shake things up, I just don't see the merit in being a one trick. Comparatively, we'll talk about like my playstyle in games. I have to learn how to play pretty much every agent or champion in the game. I like to have an understanding of their limitations, what they can and cannot do. So if I have one on my team, I understand like what they can or cannot do in supports of me. So say for example, I enjoy playing Sova. I love playing Sova. Sova is one of my favorite agents in the game. And does that mean I pick him every single match? No, I don't. And the reason why is because he's not good on certain maps. There are better initiators for other maps. There's a period of time where Sova was just like kind of nerfed, like especially when Fade came out. It's like, okay, Fade is definitely the dominant pick, especially during chamber meta. But it's like, oh, I spent thousands of hours learning lineups and all this geometry for these maps to master Sova, but now I have to swap out because I have to play another agent. For me, I don't think that is like a frustrating thing. It's more of like a fun challenge because now I get to diversify and like keep up with the new things. Now, how does this relate to like professional Valorant? Well, I think flexibility and learning from other games and other roles has actually benefited a lot of Valorant pros that we see from the early days to now. Most of these Valorant pros actually came from a lot of games that I personally played, so that's why I kind of wanted to talk about my own background and seeing kind of how it affects them. Obviously, we have all of the Counter-Strike transplants. You can name hundreds of them. You know, you got your Tenzes, your Shazams, your EUs. You want to talk about the OGs, you got Haze, Cutler, Brax for a time period, Skadoodle, etc, etc. All those were Counter-Strike transplants, which obviously made sense as Valorant. Counter-Strike was probably the closest one-to-one to Valorant. That's why I like to use it for comparisons, because I think there's a lot to be learned from both games. But then we also see the rise of other gamers from different backgrounds. Let's talk about battle royales. You know, you have Apex gamers, Zoms, BCJ. Zoms was one of the best controllers in the region, and honestly, in my opinion, it was like the best Astra player in the world at that time period. His utility usage and understanding how to utilize her stars to control his space and give him a winning fight was so unique, and that's why he got so much value out of lower tier guns, because he understood positioning and how to utilize his utility. Now, Apex is a high pace game with a relatively okay TTK. It's not like as fast as Valorant where you one-tap them in the head with any gun, but it's still pretty quick. But those fights are extremely fast-paced. You have to have very good tracking, understanding, and positioning, especially as like in Battle Royale, there are multiple people firing and engaging all the time. So seeing Zoms being able to anchor incredibly well as 3-4 people would swarm him is not something that he's unfamiliar with. And I think that's something that, again, you can take from another game. You go over to Fortnite, a game that I played maybe like a summer, like when it first came out. And like, I'm not a third-person shooter. I hate that shit. I was really good at building though. Kind of goated. But you have so many players that came from Fortnite. UCK, Governor, Swirl, who's playing in China right now. Benji Fishy, a big name in EU right now, of course, on Team Heretics. Martine, Zeke, Zipan, Mystic, Starzo, an old school Thwifo. You have so many of these other players that have found incredible success with Fortnite. Now, what is I feel like it's a very similar concept as Apex, right? Although their bullets are a little bit different as they have travel time and fall off. But the concept of being able to utilize your environment and utility to outplay and outmaneuver and outposition your opponents is really, really big. Another game that, again, that I mentioned earlier, Overwatch. You have big boy Boostio. He was a Widowmaker main from back in the day. So obviously Widowmaker plays very, very differently. But you see these high talent aim demons who were hit scan gods switching over and having a lot of success. Klaus was an Overwatch player. Baby Bay, of course, one of the earliest ones to transition over. Saya player and Carpe on T1, huge names. Munchkin, my boy, he used to play on Seoul Dynasty and failed to bring them a title. And Seoul Dynasty is the franchise owned by Gen G. So now that he won a title with Gen G at Master Shanghai, he has fully closed the circle of being a part of Gen G. And I think that is a beautiful, beautiful story. You know, you have NA favorites. You got Derek, you know, Derek Overwatch. He was a Genji player. Like, I remember watching his streams back in the day of just like Derek running around on Genji. It was so funny. But like, Derek is known as one of the best utility usage players in the world. Like, I will give him that. Like, yes, he did struggle last year, but this year he's played very well. And I still am very impressed by him. And I've always enjoyed him. And of course, a really big shout out from the OG Days is Patty fan. You know, he came from Overwatch. He was on that initial X10 roster, like showed off crazy, went back to Overwatch, was a off-tank player, and then came back to Valorant. And like, you know, dude's insane. So there's a ton of merit, in my opinion, from learning from other games, learning from other roles, learning from other champions. I think a really, really good example for all of this is Demon One. He is an individual that came from the Unreal Tournament realm, a fast-paced, like arena type shooter where you have to have very precise aim, understanding of movement, physics, positioning. Like, all of that is so high paced, and you can see how that has translated so effectively into Valorant. Yes, he has been struggling throughout 2024 and he's on the bench now for NRG, but I still think as a raw mechanical player, he is one of the best in the world. And it comes from a completely different skill set that he was able to transfer over. And I think that is really the lesson that can be learned from this. Also, shout out to the real GOAT of this all, Jesse Vash. He was pro in Dota, Counter-Strike, Overwatch, Mobile Legends, and now Valorant, and probably more. This guy has done literally everything, so I wanted to shout him out there for sure. But at the end of the day, what was this kind of talk and conversation about? Just stop one-tricking, please, man. Like, please just learn how to play the game. Like, just play other agents and learn other roles, because you locking in like Jett and Reyna and Sage and not performing and not knowing how to entry frag and not knowing how to play off your teammates' utility is absolutely frustrating. And I think you all should learn how to play other roles. Thank you very much. I hope you all enjoyed. And until next time, stay hydrated. Peace.